I'm Jessica Droste Yagan, partner and CEO of Impact Engine. We're very proud to host a public-facing event in Chicago for impact investors for the 10th year in a row. Very glad you're all here. Thanks so much for taking the time. For those of you that don't know Impact Engine, we're a public benefit corporation with the mission to engage more investors, entrepreneurs, and advisors in a market where financial returns are linked to positive social impacts. We accomplish this through hosting events like this, and speaking and writing ourselves about the field and what we're learning, as well as managing impact venture capital and private equity strategies for our own investors. Those of you who do know us know how passionate we are about this mission and how proud we are to have played a leading role in the growth of the Chicago impact investing ecosystem over the last 10 years. This year, we've organized our virtual series by type of impact investors. We started with governments last week. This week is individuals. In the following 2 weeks, we have foundations and private funds. Each of these types of impact investors has their own unique opportunities as well as constraints to manage around. I want to pause and thank the Chicago Community Trust and the MacArthur Foundation for their critical support of this series, as well as their ongoing support of the Chicago impact investing ecosystem. They will each be sharing more about their work as impact investors in next week's session, where we focus on foundations. Registration is still open for the final 2 sessions, and we would love to see you there. I think someone's going to try to drop the link into the chat in case you want to go ahead and register now. Of course, as I mentioned, today's session is about individuals as impact investors, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers. One of the most interesting things I think about individual investors versus the other categories is that there's so much freedom. There's really, when it's your own money, you actually have the most options and the fewest constraints. And so you'll really see that come through with the various examples that we're going to share and hear from today. So first, you're going to hear from Noelle, Chief Investment Officer of Builders Initiative, which is the philanthropic arm of Builders Vision, which is the impact platform started by Lucas Walton, which includes philanthropy, asset management, and direct investing. So Builders Vision is an example of a very large and scalable impact investing approach that's facilitated by a significant team and encompasses almost any aspect of impact investing you can imagine across different pools of capital, different asset classes, and different financial return targets. Noelle will then introduce her colleague, Kate Danaher at S2g Ventures to show how the money flows a couple of levels deeper. S2g is the direct investing arm of Builders Vision, which includes strategies focused on addressing climate change through venture capital, growth equity, and real assets. So Kate will bring to life a slice of how this capital is directed and share some examples of its impact on the ground. After that, I'll welcome Jane DiRenzo Pigott, Managing Director of R3 Group. Jane has pursued her own impact investing strategy without a large staff and with a different focus, with a lens on equity. Jane will share more about her approach and then introduce you to an investee of hers, Melissa Widen from First Women's Bank. Melissa will be able to, again, kind of show you how the money flows through, and has impact on the ground. So again, we want people to understand both that there's a strategy and an intentionality and approach that impact investors have, but also that it matters because the money gets through and actually makes an impact eventually where it's going. So we're very focused on trying to leave time for Q&A here, and we will do our very best. So please submit your Q&A through the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we will keep an eye on it and do our best to address your questions at the end with as much time as we have left. Before we jump in and hear from these amazing speakers, I thought it'd be helpful to review how we think about the terminology of this field, which I know can sometimes be confusing. And even though this is called the Impact Investing Showcase, we really mean to address the breadth of the ways that you can invest to align with your values, or the ways that you can use these different types of strategies that encompass social and environmental issues and attributes. So socially responsible investing, or SRI, is screening investments in or out based on whether or not they align with your mission or values. A common recent example of this is divesting from carbon-centric companies. Environmental social governance investing, or ESG, is making investments in companies based on their performance on ESG factors, which is really about how you run a company. Any company in any industry can manage ESG better or worse. And it's becoming increasingly acknowledged by mainstream investors that ESG factors are material to financial performance, and they're regularly using ESG data as part of their analyses. Finally, impact investing is very intentionally investing to create a specific positive or social or environmental impact. This is what Impact Engine does, for example, when we require each of our investments to measurably improve economic opportunity, environmental sustainability, or health equity. Again, this is the impact investing showcase, but I welcomed, and I think you'll enjoy hearing from our speakers about all three of these dimensions of how you can align your investments. And finally, within impact investing, I think this is a helpful framework to think about the different ways you can create impact. And you can invest with one or more of these impacts at a time, if you like. So Impact Engine, again, focuses on product. We focus on the product the company sells so that the way the company makes money is also the very same thing that creates the impact. Place is another way you can invest with impact, where you intentionally focus on creating an impact in a certain place. People would be particularly investing to address discrepancies where there's underserved groups like women or people of color in terms of access to capital or other kinds of impacts. And finally, process and paradigm. Process is like ESG in that any company in any industry can improve its environmental social governance practices or its process. But to make it impact investing, an investor needs to go in with a hypothesis on why their money will improve those practices. Perhaps they will be a very active manager pushing the company to improve. And finally, paradigm catches the companies that we need in order to solve big societal problems, but that maybe aren't directly inherently impactful, such as perhaps a new and more accurate carbon measurement system that could allow for better decision-making, but isn't inherently reducing carbon. So you'll hear about, I think, a little bit about all of these during the course of today and the course of this series. And again, hopefully gives you a flavor of all the different kind of tools and levers that you can pull as you're exploring maybe in your own world, whether you could be an impact investor or do more impact investing. So with that, I'd like to introduce Noelle Laing. Noelle is the Chief Investment Officer of Builders Vision, as I said. Previously, Noelle was a managing director at Cambridge Associates. While there, she worked with institutional and family office clients and helped develop and execute mission-related and impact investing programs and portfolios. She's a relatively new Chicagoan. We wholeheartedly welcome her to the city. And thanks so much for being here today, Noelle.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm so happy to be here representing Builders Vision. As you mentioned, this is an impact platform founded by Lucas Walton. Our mission is to shift markets and minds for good, and our vision is a humane and healthy planet. We call ourselves an impact platform as we have many capital tools in our toolbox to address important issues. So for example, we use grants, impact first investments, market rate impact investments, advocacy, and more to invest in the areas of food and agriculture, oceans, energy, climate, and communities. We use all these tools because we recognize that none of them by themselves can solve the major problems we're facing. So basically, if you come to Builders Vision with a problem, we have multiple tools to help solve it, and we can take that issue first, tool second approach to driving change. I'm going to use just a couple of slides here to help explain our structure and impact philosophy, as I think they help tell the Builders Vision story. So the first slide here just shows our mission, as I mentioned, shifting markets and minds for good. And what that means in actuality is that we're building coalitions, aligning our investment strategies and catalyzing capital in order to advance this mission. We're more than just your typical grant makers or impact investors. We're always thinking about how we can bring more people into the fold, as we know that to solve the major issues facing society and the environment, we can't do it alone. Moving on to slide 2 of my slides, I am the Chief Investment Officer of Builders Initiative, which is the philanthropic arm of Builders Vision. I manage our $1.2 billion foundation endowment across equities, bonds, private investments, and so on, to be aligned with our impact and ESG themes, which you see here. I also manage a few of our other impact first oriented portfolios centered around these themes. And Lucas and the rest of us here at Builders Vision honed in on these 4 impact areas to help us focus. But we also recognize that these cover a broad range of ESG priorities. So the potential outcomes by focusing on these 4 key areas are huge. So here we have the oceans, climate and energy, food and agriculture, and community listed with a little bit more of a description underneath. I mentioned that I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Builders Initiative. We also have a couple other arms of the organization, and we all work collaboratively together. We have our asset management division called Builders Asset Management, which is also making impact investments, mostly through third-party fund managers and co-investments. And S2g, which is the direct investing arm of the office, investing across these impact focus areas. In a few minutes, as Jessica mentioned, I'll introduce my colleague Kate Danaher, who is managing director of S2g, and she's going to discuss how they do impact investing and how our collaboration really works across the office. On this next slide here, this integrated approach to driving systems change, you can just have a visual here of how we take this integrated approach through the three key areas here: investments, philanthropy, and advocacy and coalition building. This is our flywheel that allows us to address important issues, and each team at Builders Vision, Builders Initiative, Builders Asset Management, and S2g have a role to play. So as you can see here on the investment side, we're making direct investments, we're making fund investments, we're building co-investment syndicates. On the advocacy and coalition side, we're using media and other tools. And then in philanthropy, we're doing everything from strategic grant making to emergency relief to program related investments and so many other tools. So it just shows that we can really pull a lot of levers, as I mentioned, to address the areas that are important to us. So that's, the slides can come down if that's possible. I'm just gonna help try to bring some of this to life. And I wanted to take a minute to highlight an investment that I'm really excited to have just funded in the endowment, the foundation endowment. As I mentioned, we invest across asset classes, and we're aligning those investments in the foundation to address our mission and vision. So within our bond allocation, we recently invested in the RBC Access Fund, which has a mandate to invest in bonds that support low and moderate income communities. And because we're investing through a separate account, we've asked the manager to focus on a number of Builders Vision's impact areas, specifically including a focus on Chicago place-based bonds. So as we were doing our due diligence, we were excited to learn that they've already invested in bonds in the Chicago region. For example, they invested in a bond funding an affordable housing unit in the neighborhood of Englewood, which is one of the neighborhoods we invest in through our Chicago grant making. They also made an investment in a facility that's providing intergenerational housing in Chicago to both seniors who are raising their grandchildren and youth aging out of foster care. And they quoted a statistic that said that 20% of children who were in foster care will become immediately homeless. So this type of facility is greatly needed. And these types of investments are so meaningful to us on so many levels, as we believe that those closest to the problem are best equipped to solve it. And I'm so excited that our support for those on the ground can even extend through alignment of our endowment's investments. The other great aspect of this investment is that it's also offered through mutual funds. So investors don't need to have $1 billion portfolio to access the impact being generated through this opportunity. So to help further bring some of our impact investments to life, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Kate Danaher, who is Managing Director at S2g. She, as mentioned, she'll provide an overview of S2g, her role, and highlight how our investment thesis around oceans can be applied across investment vehicles. Kate?
Thanks, Noelle. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. I am particularly excited about this topic. I've spent my career in impact investing thinking about how individuals, both accredited and non-accredited, can really leverage every dollar of their capital for change. And so I think that this is a really important topic. And the reason that I came to Builders Vision is because I think the power of an impact platform that Lucas has developed, along with the kind of integrated approach that Noelle just described, is an incredibly powerful tool for change. So before I deep dive into one of our investments that we're excited about, S2g, I wanted to use this last slide that Noelle spoke to kind of put some context around the investment side of that of the pie. So S2g Ventures is, as she mentioned, the direct investment arm of Builders Vision. And like the rest of the office, we make direct investments across key impact themes that Noelle shared. So food and agriculture, oceans, climate and energy, and community. I manage all of our work around our oceans venture investing, but we have a breadth of focus areas. And before I dive into the specific example, I want to talk a little bit about our integrated approach through our oceans work. So the oceans team at a high level, shares a vision for the impact that we want to have in the world, in oceans. And that vision sits across our investment work, our philanthropic work, and our advocacy work. So not all of our strategies tie down exactly, but we have shared themes and shared impact that we want to have. And so what is really special and powerful about our platform is that within each investment sector, we have a number of investment tools that allow us to look at a broad set of opportunities within the ocean space. So these tools include, and Noelle kind of rattled some of these off, fund-to-fund investments, real asset investments, impact first, like very high risk capital, and venture capital for early to growth stage businesses. And I think it's a huge privilege, and it's it's really inspiring to be able to look at a theme such as the oceans and all the things that need to change and all the levers that do need to be pulled, and be able to look at an opportunity and not just have to say, I'm sorry, that doesn't fit our specific investment theme or our return profile. But I think, Noelle, I liked what you said, issue first, tool second. We can say that is an issue that is important, and if it can be resolved, we can have tremendous impact. Let's go find the tool within our toolkit to address it. So again, we've got these three parts of the pie, but even within just the investment sector, we have a number of financial tools that we can use and bring to bear for the issues that we're trying to not solve for, but at least advance. So then with that, the S2g Ventures side of the house, we really focus on all of the direct investments for our impact platform. And we really focus on the early to growth stage businesses. So the company I want to spotlight briefly is relevant to the Midwest. The company is called Aquatic Protein, and it was founded in 2018 and is located in Beardstown, Illinois. Aquatic Protein was founded to address two critical, but at least on the surface, unrelated issues. One is the issues around the proliferation of invasive Asian carp in the Midwest River Basin. And the second is the need for high quality, low cost replacement to fish meal as an ingredient in animal and fish feed and pet food. So on the first part, many of you are probably more familiar with the issue than I am, but Asian carp in the river basin is absolutely decimating the ecosystem and native species in that area. The government spends millions and millions and millions of dollars every year to try and find a solution for it. Aquatic Protein is kind of the commercial solution for this invasive species. And then on the other side of that, we essentially fish anchovety out of the oceans, a keystone species, in order to feed fish on land and through aquaculture to put into pet food and to feed other land animals, so other farming animals. And so there's a huge need to replace that wild catch with something that is a more sustainable but low cost solution. So Aquatic Protein very specifically holds a proprietary zero waste fish and oil production technology, which can convert low worth resources into high-end products in a sustainable and cost-efficient manner. There's a pilot facility in Beardstown, Illinois, that's focused on the remediation of the invasive carp, and they partner specifically with a lot of the fishermen in that area and provide incentives for them to fish that specific species. Aquatic Protein is currently removing more Asian carp than any other commercial or government effort focused on the topic. And the company's technology has the potential to maximize the value of global protein in wild and aquaculture production, combat invasive aquatic species, and reduce pressure on overfished wild stocks around the world, the anchovety being one of the examples I just gave. The scalable zero waste technology unlocks sustainable and profitable practices related to byproducts and aquatic nuisances, which was once hindered by environmental issues, and it has also a very nice return on capital. So for S2g Ventures, and this is a great investment for our venture arm versus another tool in our toolkit, because one, the impact that is enabled by the growth of the business. And so we really found it compelling that we could both have impact and a financial return. There are other opportunities that we look at, where we think the impact is phenomenal and there is a financial return, but it may not match the venture model that we are investing for. And that is where we would try to find a different investment vehicle through our platform to solve. But just to wrap this up with Aquatic Protein, I think if this company is successful, and again, it's very early stage, the core of this company in Beardstown, Illinois, could have meaningful impact on the health of the Midwest river basins. But this technology is also broadly applicable across other invasive species around the world and also other waste products. So I think that if they're successful and we can license and replicate this model in other places, it could have a huge impact in other regions beyond the Midwest. And so that is why it's really compelling for us. So I will pause there. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your questions. I want to hand it back over to Jessica.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to share the update on what you're working on. Really help bring to life Builder's vision and the way one individual has chosen to use his money to advance impact investing alongside philanthropy and other tools in many different ways. Multiple people in the chat were asking about how to get in touch with Builder's vision. The best way to do that is to go to their website and contact them through that format. You can also, please do put Q&A here into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we should have plenty of time for Q&A, so we'll be happy to try to get to those as much as we can. Now I'm honored to welcome Jane DiRenzo Pigott to share her experience and approach to impact investing. Jane is Managing Director of R3 Group, LLC, and specializes in providing leadership, change, and talent consulting to professional services firms, public and private companies, and family offices. From 1993 until 2002, she served as the chair of the global environmental law practice at Winston & Strong, one of the largest global law firms, where she was also the first woman to serve on the firm's executive committee and its compensation committee. Jane serves on the boards of Northwestern University, the Lyric Opera of Chicago, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, among other nonprofits, and is an independent trustee and chair of the board of the Van Eck Mutual Funds. Last, but most importantly to me, Jane recently joined the board of Impact Engine Management, PPC. So thank you so much for being here, Jane.
Thanks, Jessica. If we could go to the next slide, please. At the beginning of this, Jessica described an individual impact investor as having a lot of freedom, and that's absolutely true. And what I'm going to tell you is a personal story, not the right way to be an individual impact investor. I had an epiphany moment where I looked at my portfolio and my investment strategy, and I realized that, especially after questions, the concept of measurement of the impact that I was having on key metrics or metrics that were important to me was not possible. With the traditional institutions that I was using to help me manage money or source opportunities, which meant that I had to take some responsibility for educating myself and enhancing my network to be in a position to decide what values I wanted to invest with and to source opportunities that aligned with those values, the impact I was looking for, and the level of risk that I was looking for. My values are my values and not right for everybody. So I'm not telling anybody that you need to do exactly this, but I'm very concerned with equity and access. And equity and access has an impact on every single investment, whether you're looking at climate change investment or you're looking at a health equity investment. The opportunity to assess with the P's that Jessica outlined at the beginning, where the equity and access impacts are going to be is what I do in my investing strategy now. And I take much more personal responsibility in looking at exactly what I'm going to measure. And I walk from things that don't meet my minimum standards. What does that look like? If I'm looking at a direct investment and the team that does the presentation on it includes only straight white men, for example, it's not an automatic knockout for me, but if they can't answer the question, what's your plan for diversifying your management team, your ownership team, then it's a knockout for me. It's been an interesting journey on this front because I found that most of the presentations aren't to me personally because I'm an individual and I partner with other impact investors to have a strategy to source direct investments and fund investments and to do the due diligence. But one of the most interesting things to me is being able to use my voice with the questions that are important to me and have them influence the other people, the other investors who are on the call, who may have a different set of priorities than I do, or just haven't thought about equity and access in the same way that I do. Why is this important to me? First and foremost, I think it's the right thing to do. And I think unless we very intentionally address the lack of equity and access, we will be talking about this topic and be in the same place 10 years from now, or pick a time frame. The second reason is if you look at the social science research, pick an industry, diverse teams financially outperform teams that have less diversity. And this is not a philanthropic venture for me. This is a venture where among the ways I will measure it is financial return, not just the impact return that I get. I also, in my investment strategy, I invest money, and that's one of the places where I do the investment, but I also want to invest my time and energy and expertise in being able to specifically have an impact personally, in addition to the money that I put into the process. Last thing that I look for is I like disruptive solutions, and there's a lot of ways to have a disruptive solution, and that tells you a lot about my risk tolerance. My risk tolerance is high, and so I'm willing to have a team that is intentionally looking to disrupt the status quo. And so those are part of the way that I look at this. And I thought that it would be interesting to illustrate these key points in my strategy by an example. Thank you for switching the slide. First Women's Bank. The first time I heard about it, it was early in their seed round of raising money. And interesting concept, they were women in Chicago, almost all of whom I knew because even though Chicago is a big city, the cadre of professional women in Chicago is smaller than you would like to believe. And we talked about the mission of bringing a bank that was focused on the women's economy and the equity in access for women to that economy, and having at least the initial seed round and then the rest of the rounds be led by women. Very unique concept. Of course I was in. Then they started the round of looking for, they put together the pieces. They created an amazing team who are a very diverse group of people, but women-led still. They outlined the roles of people that they needed for success. They outlined the regulatory strategy. They outlined the strategy to reaching the women's economy, all exactly in the sweet spot of how I wanted to have impact, how I wanted to measure ROI. And they also had a strategy for allowing me to participate personally, because I could source other investors for them in both the seed round and in their later financing round. And I was also given the opportunity to use my contacts with entities like not-for-profits, where the mission alignment of where they banked was going to be important. And I could make my own deposit into the bank. And the more deposits they have, the more opportunity they have to loan to small businesses that are women-led. And the mission itself, which is on the slide, you can see, is pretty compelling to be part of the only in the country. I don't want to steal any thunder, but I wanted to tell you why First Women's Bank was an investment that hit my philosophy on all points. And I want to introduce Melissa Widen, who is going to tell you about First Women's Bank and the continuing opportunities with First Women's Bank. She's a founder and the chief administrative officer, also a director of First Women's Bank. During the pandemic, which is when they did their fundraising, she was relentlessly adapting to change circumstances in raising the money. Before First Women's Bank, she was an entrepreneur and a leader, and also a business leader, but probably much more importantly, she had spent decades in Chicago building her professional network and credibility that allowed her to do a fantastic job of getting First Women's Bank fundraising to the finish line, and a fast start on this. Melissa?
Thanks so much, Jane. Thank you for your kind introduction, and of course for your early and ongoing support and partnership with First Women's Bank. I also want to thank Jessica and Priya and Tanya and really everyone at Impact Engine who immediately recognized the importance of impact banking and the need for a bank like First Women's Bank that promotes social justice and has a mission at its core. So as Jane described, I am one of the founders of First Women's Bank. I'm also the general counsel, the chief administrative officer, and a board member. And I'm really thrilled to be able to talk to you all today and tell you a little bit more about First Women's Bank, the first women-founded, women-led, and majority women-owned commercial bank in the country with a strategic focus on the women's economy. In 2018, a group of women came together to start discussing the idea of a women's bank. And I was incredibly intrigued, but I also wasn't really sure what is a women's bank? How would a women's bank be different? Why do we need a women's bank? And so I really dug into the data and was astounded at the amount of objective third-party research around the need for a bank like First Women's Bank. The data shows that women are leading an economic revolution in this country, that the women's economy is large and powerful and growing and has enormous potential. However, the women's economy, which is sort of what we call the women-owned and women-led businesses, they are struggling to access the capital they need to grow those businesses. Just a little bit of data, women own over 42% of all of the businesses in this country, and that translates to over 13 million businesses. 50% of those businesses are owned by women of color. And actually the growth of that segment of the women's economy is part of the engine that's growing, that's causing the increase in numbers of the women's economy overall. So this is a really intersectional issue because the women's economy together needs capital for their businesses to grow and thrive. But there is a huge gender gap in access to capital that's really preventing these businesses from reaching their full potential. The women's economy are only accessing an estimated 16% of all commercial loans, which translates to a little bit over 4% of the total dollars lent. And this gap is widening. So this is really the reason we formed this bank, to address what we think is the fundamental problem facing women-owned and women-led businesses, and that's access to capital. Promoting women's economic participation is both a moral and an economic issue. Our goal is to level the playing field when it comes to access to capital, to promote financial inclusion across the board, to help empower women economically. And that's sort of what we set out to do beginning in 2018. The path to the formation of this bank was challenging. We were a group of women with no track record who really sort of came together around this mission. We were raising capital in the middle of a pandemic in a highly regulated industry with many barriers to entry. So it was a challenging couple of years, but we celebrated last year in the summer when we received our charter from the state of Illinois, our depository insurance from the FDIC, and we had our grand opening in the fall. We closed our capital raise last fall after raising $36.2 million in capital, and we were thrilled to really launch First Women's Bank with a strategy that made us incredibly different from any other bank. Really, we are a bank like none other. I mentioned impact banking. That's what we do. So we are really disrupting the banking industry. If you think about traditional notions of banking, the banking is very transactional, right? What, as consumers, as business owners, what do we think about? What are the products and services that this bank offers? How much money am I going to earn? Is my money secure? We are really disrupting that model by offering a very, very different way of thinking about your banking relationship. And in many ways, it's applying that same impact lens that you bring to investing. So asking yourself, how diverse is this board? Who's on this leadership team? What is the bank using my money for? Who's benefiting? And what does this bank stand for? What are their values? And are they consistent with mine? And of course, on the equity point, what is this bank doing to address gender and racial inequalities? With First Women's Bank, there is now an opportunity to bank differently. We are suggesting that you can really reconceive of banking, and that you can choose a bank that checks all of those sort of traditional boxes around security and products and return, but you can bank at a place that is a vehicle for social change and offers you a very active and tangible way to be part of the solution for the women's economy. Okay, so let me explain how we're doing this. We developed a very unique strategy that leverages our mission to really differentiate the bank on both deposits and on lending. So briefly, I'll sort of give you an overview of our strategy. On the lending side, we're leaning heavily into SBA lending. SBA lending is really ideally suited and was developed for the small business economy and is really a great fit for the women's economy for a variety of reasons, including the fact that we know women tend to concentrate in service-related industries, and SBA loans are ideal for that. Since we launched last year, we are building an incredibly strong pipeline of SBA and conventional loans to small businesses across the country. Mission is at the core of everything we do, and we are thrilled that to date, almost all of our loans to our first borrowers are to women-owned and women-led companies, including a business started in Washington State by two sisters, a Black-owned smoothie franchise on the South Side, led by an incredible mother-daughter team, and also a husband and wife team in Texas, whose story you're going to see on a video in a few minutes. On the deposit side, we're also leveraging our mission, and we're using it to create a platform through which corporations and nonprofits, foundations, governmental entities, individuals, everyone can provide tangible support for the women's economy through FDIC insured deposits. And then these deposits are then deployed directly through small business loans with a central focus on the women's economy. We are having great success to date on our deposit strategy. I think there's a lot of excitement around having the ability to leverage your cash for impact, right? This isn't philanthropy. You're not making an equity investment and putting your cash at risk. You are using your bank you are using your banking relationship to drive social change. And you're directly supporting the women's economy just by holding deposits at a place like First Women's Bank. And one of the most innovative and exciting parts of our deposit strategy is our corporate mission partnerships, where we are going to large global corporations across the country and saying, come partner with us. You will be able to demonstrate in a very public way your commitment to social justice and to equality simply by holding deposits with us. And we are having, again, we've had an amazing reaction to this strategy. So far, we've announced a really impressive list of corporate partners, including Aon and Microsoft, United Airlines, William Blair, Comcast, Western Gulf Association, and we have others that we're announcing soon, and we're in discussions with many others. So there's a lot of interest and excitement about partnering with a First Women's Bank to support the women's economy. One final thing I will say is that in addition to sort of our bank of money, when we were sort of putting together the concept, we knew that, and the data certainly bears this out, that in addition to capital, which is vital for businesses to grow, we know that small businesses need a lot of other support. They need networks, they need resources, they need mentoring, and educational training. There's business advisory services. The list is pretty long, and we decided to create the First Women's Business Collective, which is really a community and a platform to really aggregate those resources, networking opportunities, mentoring, referral programs, content, all to support and inspire our clients, and also business owners who may not be ready for a loan from First Women's Bank or any bank yet, but just need a little help getting there. So that's sort of an overview of First Women's Bank. There are many ways you can help. You can help us grow, and you can help us support the women's economy. I'm inviting all of you to join our over 200 investors, including Billie Jean King, who's our largest investor, Fidelity and Bank of America, all of our mission partners, and so many individuals to join us on our mission to grow the economy and elevate the role of women within it. And it's really easy to do. It's easy to align your awareness and your values with action. And that's just by opening an account and holding deposits with us. There are significant sort of ripple effects for helping support the bank with deposits. So I will you can open an account online, and you can go to our website, firstwomens.bank. I'll put that in the chat, and we'd love to have your support. We also, of course, are a lender to small businesses. So if you have know of any small businesses in need of capital, please let us know. And now we're going to watch a short video about one of our newest borrowers.
Builders Coffee, it's a coffee business that was founded by Don and Linda Eccles in Nebraska. And it's an amazing model, an amazing business that they built. And really, when we first, went into, wanting to be entrepreneurs and, start this journey, it aligned very well and ended up being like the perfect company. Because when I look at their values, that's love, courage, humility, and integrity. And those values just, align so well with who we are even as people and as individuals. I was born and raised in Nigeria, and I moved to the United States in junior high. And growing up, I come from a very close-knit family. I am one of 6 siblings, and we are all very close. I married a man that has so much love for coffee. I wake up every morning, to the smell of coffee because he grinds his own beans and, the whole shebang. Last year, the apartment opportunity for we were introduced to First Women's Bank through one of the preferred lenders with scooters. But honestly, it was way more than that. We were working with a tight deadline. And when we just kept running into roadblocks and, roadblock after roadblock, I specifically remember there was a night, my husband and I were sitting in the living room and just talking about all the, issues we were having, with lending. And for a minute there, I paused and I said, you know what, Tosin, let's pray. Like, we haven't even prayed about this. And I kid you not, less than a week after just, praying and letting go was when we got the, call from the lender saying, hey, I have, a lender for you to meet, and it's, First Women's Bank. Thank God for First Women's Bank. And I don't say that lightly. It really was a match made in heaven. We are in construction right now, so yay! So very excited about that. Our first market that we're in is Bridgeport, Texas, and we're also right now in conversations for our second market. For me, financing and finding the right lending partner, it means a lot. It means really your dreams coming true, your dreams becoming a reality. My advice to other women entrepreneurs, or really anyone that's along this path, my advice to them is not to let fear hold you back. Have the conversations, reach out to banks, and that alone is just the first step to actually realizing that, hey, this is possible. It can be done, and my family, we are a testimony of that. It can be done.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jane and Melissa. Another great but very different example about how an individual decided to be very intentional about the impact of her investments, and how we can see that flowing through to impact on the ground. So before we move into Q&A, I wanted to share some ideas to explore for those who maybe whose assets don't allow them to participate in all the options we've heard about from the speakers, and or if you just don't have a lot of time or support or don't know where to start. So these organizations on the slide here are each impact investing or ESG options that are very approachable in terms of minimums. And while I can't specifically recommend any of them, I can say that they have been recommended by people whose judgment I trust, and or I have tried them myself. So all worth taking a look at. And maybe my colleague can drop the links to these in the chat. We'll also share the links to these when we write up this session on our website. In addition to the logos on the slide, I encourage you to ask questions. Ask your employer if there's an ESG option for your 401k. Ask your financial advisor what they offer. And of course, think about where you bank. Melissa offered that as another option for how you can kind of leverage the impact of your money and your investments. I invite others to share, others from the panel. If you have other ideas you want to drop in the chat, participants, please go ahead and do so anytime. And if we just go to the next slide, I just want to throw out a couple more resources. Just in terms of learning, sometimes it's hard, again, just to start clicking on links and kind of where do I start? So there's a few places to look. There are others too, but these are a few that, again, I have personal connections with and think they do really high quality work. So Invest for Better is a newer organization focused on bringing women together to learn how to build their confidence as investors and invest in ways that align with their values. Chicago's second Invest for Better Peer Circle will begin in May, hosted by Karen Muchin, and other circles will be convening around the country virtually or in person around the same time. Chicago's third circle will begin in the fall. If you're interested in joining a circle in Chicago or elsewhere or learning more, you can either contact Invest for Better on their website or reach out to Impact Engine, info@the Impact Engine, or go through our website and we can connect you. And then Tonic and the Impact are global membership organizations that work with individuals on their impact investing journeys, and both have great resources on their websites. Whether or not you actually want to be a member, I think it's worth checking out their website. So, and just lastly, before we jump into Q&A here, don't forget about all the other tools you have to make change. Obviously, investment is a big one. It's the one we're focused on for this series, but as a voter with your purchasing power, speaking up at work, donating, there's so many other ways that you can make a difference with your time and money. So hopefully this is just a starting point, maybe a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of ideas for action. So with that, I'm going to invite all the speakers back up on screen. And we have a little bit of time here for a couple of questions to wrap up. So thanks to those of you who put questions in the chat. We have some good questions. And I think what I'll do is I'll kick off a question with like kind of who can start, and then others can kind of feel free to jump in with your own answers and perspective. So one really good question that came up is really like, how do you balance your due diligence or your research when you're making an impact investment between impact and financial return? And particularly around the impact due diligence. And this question came up particularly when we were hearing about, I think, some of the oceans work, Kate. So I'm going to let you start. Like, how do you really scientifically diligence, right? Because it's not just, do I feel good about the impact? And it's not even just that, well, this is a credible person who's founding this organization, but you actually want to understand, like, is this credible science? Will it work? You know, do we think it will work? And then also, like any potential side effects or, you know, like externalities from some of these new technologies. So I'll let you start, Kate, and then others can jump in if they like.
Sure. Yeah. So diligence is about learning. It's not necessarily about perfecting. I think that especially when you're investing in new or more nascent sectors like this, it's hard to find the perfect investment, but we do always. So a few questions. One of the key questions we ask ourselves at the beginning of every investment process is, what are the unforeseen consequences or knock-on effects if this is effective? Because a lot of these technologies are new and emerging. I mean, for example, in alternative feed for there's a great example. Asparagopsis is a seaweed that is currently being researched as a feed additive for cattle that can reduce the methane of cattle by 80-90%. But there's a lot of scientific research out there that is it's inconclusive if there are knock-on effects to humans who consume the milk that's produced by the cows. So there's a lot of scientific research that says it's perfectly safe, and there's just as much that says jury's out. And so we've decided to not make an investment there yet, because that feels like a very critical piece of scientific information, also regulatory information, that we need to feel incredibly confident about before we make that investment. That said, on the other side of things, when you're doing due diligence, you are going to have, at the end of the day, probably an incomplete set of information to still make your investment decision on. And so we just try to have very honest conversations about what's the potential impact, what's the potential knock-on consequences or negative impacts of making this type of investment. And if we don't make this investment, what are we or is the world missing out on by not helping to at least accelerate this technology and give it a chance? So it's not perfect. The last thing I'll say is we often will hire third-party technical assessments to be done on the technology. So it's a nice entrepreneur, their patent portfolio and their technology assessment looks sound, but we do hire third parties to give us a viewpoint into, you know, whether that's valid or not.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I would also say, like, maybe if you're not in a position to hire a third party expert, I would think about like connecting yourself with the experts that are doing that type of research. So either, for example, looking at investing in a fund that's trying to solve the problem that you're trying to solve, and vetting the fund managers that they actually have the expertise or can hire those scientific experts, or affiliating with nonprofits that you know to be experts in the space and following their science and research and the types of technologies that they're supporting. Jane, do you have an opinion from a totally different perspective? You're not doing a ton of deep science investments, but you do kind of try to balance impact and financial return.
I love the point that Kate made, that there's you can't wait for perfect to do an investment on this front, that you have to, if you're going to go forward, you decide how you think you're going to measure impact with the flexibility to do something different in the future, and you don't want to do any harm. I think that that's very important. I also think it's important to know that there's not one way to measure impact, and that different founders, and ideas will measure impact in different ways or have an idea of how they want to measure impact. I also love organizations like Impact Engine that think about that when they're doing an investment and create a contract with the articulation of impact and the ability to be flexible about changing that if it makes sense on an ongoing basis, but an upfront commitment that impact is part of what will be produced and reported when you make an investment on that front.
Thank you. And our time is quickly going away, so I'm gonna ask Noelle and Melissa just to weigh in here on our final question, which is, it's really sometimes very overwhelming to get started in this space. And I know, Melissa, you've shared a lot of very specific ways to get started, particularly with First Women's Bank. And I wonder if you have anything else to add, like in addition to complementary, as you've thought a lot about particularly investing in women and as the women's economy, and maybe you've seen other options out there to put alongside the suggestions you have at First Women's Bank. And then Noelle, you've worked with a lot of families and institutions as they've kind of gotten started on this over the years. And just any advice you have on like just how to dip your toe in the water. I'll let Melissa go first.
Thanks, Jessica. So, I think the first step in that journey is really just awareness, starting to think about, what does this organization do? What is the impact of their work? How will my investment support kind of have ripple effects and help create impact and create change? And I think that's an important lens to bring to whatever we're doing, where we spend our money, how we spend our money, and of course, how we're investing it. I have just been overwhelmed by over the past several years as I've really entered this community in earnest at how many amazing organizations there are, and mission focused, equity focused, justice focused individuals that are out there that are doing such important work. And it is so inspiring to me. So I think there's an enormous community of people and organizations that are really focused on trying to sort of dismantle the inequities in our system. And I'm always encouraged and excited by the entire community. And I think you've put some great resources out there. I actually was writing some of them down because I'm always amazed at how this community is really growing.
Thank you. Well, I'll let you have the final word. And then, well, I'll have you have the final, and I'll have the final just to wrap up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jessica. I know it is a lot to get started, and the families and institutions I've worked with have been very institutional in nature. So they will, will start by thinking about their goals and what they're trying to do, and, changing their investment policy statement, et cetera, et cetera. If you are more nimble as an individual and investor, I think it's really dipping your toe in the water. Make an investment in a mutual fund that is integrating ESG, learn from it. There are a lot of products out there, and I talk about impact sincerity a lot. And, maybe that one turns out to be the one, that, you can do better on the impact sincerity side. But I think just dipping your toe, putting, an amount in there that you feel comfortable with, and just getting started learning, networking. I think those are, if you're managing kind of your risk appropriately, it should be a good way to just get started, and then you can join and participate in things for like Tonic and whatnot to further expand that.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much to all of you. I'm going to wrap up really quickly here. Thanks so much to everyone who joined in the audience. Thanks to our speakers, all of which I found extremely inspiring. And I already knew what they were working on. I want to thank again our supporters, Chicago Community Trust and MacArthur Foundation, for making this series possible. As a reminder, we do have 2 more sessions coming up, so please feel free to register anytime. The link's here in the chat. And then finally, we do have a code here. If you have a moment to give us feedback, we would welcome it. Thanks to those who also are sharing feedback along the way in the chat. That has been noted. We'll always take the opportunity to improve. So thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.